If the engine suggests it, maybe you say, well, I don't think so, but maybe.
Judit said something very, very important. The words in the spirit of the position. That's, you don't hear it from the young players. I bet you most of them don't understand what it means. What do you mean, spirit of the position?
I think at this point we had better bring out our third panelist. We've already touched a little bit on technology, and I think it would be a disservice to this conversation if we don't bring out Frederic Friedel. Frederic is a co-founder of the chess database company ChessBase, a groundbreaking software which is more or less universally accepted as the primary program used by chess players worldwide to study the opening moves of chess and to prepare for specific opponents. Fred, how are you?
I'm fine in lockdown.
See, like the rest of us.
I would like to mention that this development came about exactly 35 years ago. And responsible for this was, among others, Garry here. Because he came to my home in June or July 1985, made friends with me and my family in about 7 minutes, and then sat down and said, okay, tell me everything you know about computers. I told him everything I knew about computers, and he told me everything that computers should be doing for chess. And we designed a database. And then, with his encouragement, luckily I found a very good programmer, and with his encouragement, we created ChessBase, and in 1986, we launched it. And I would like to remind you that Garry had a unique position in the chess world. He had more information than most other chess players, than all other chess players, because he had seconds and grandmasters helping him and so on. But he made it a democratic movement. He got that kind of preparation for all chess players. Normally if you have a racket in chess, in tennis or something, which is just superior to everything else, you don't immediately say, well, everyone should have this kind of a racket. He democratized chess learning. So thanks for that. And since then, we've developed this program, and it's the standard. Every chess player uses it to prepare. And this was partially his responsibility.
Garry, that's actually really fascinating to me. I mean, okay, in most sports, you imagine you're a sports team or you're a sports player and you have some significant competitive advantage, like the access to, a large database of games, and you share this with all other players. Could you discuss sort of what your sort of feelings about this were? This is actually like mind-blowing to me, I have to say.
No, Fred, thank you very much for your flattering comments. But I just, I had no idea of benefiting the whole, world of chess and all my competitors. I just believed it was a natural development for our game, because I already, I could see immediately what would be the result of merging chess databases that we had in our notebooks, the very primitive databases, with machines. And I thought it would move our game, to a new level. I think I was right. I think I was lucky, and the world of chess was lucky that I found Fred in June 1985, so in Hamburg, who was listening very carefully and who was also lucky to find us good programmers. And by the end of 1986, the ChessBase was ready. And I think the first test of the program was in February 1987, and unless I'm wrong, where I just tested it by preparing for the simultaneous exhibition against Swiss national team.
No, it wasn't. It was in January, and you had played a clock simultaneous against the Hamburg team, and you had lost, and you had the only simul you had ever lost in your life. It's a clock simul.
Fred.
Yeah?
Fred, I lost this match against Hamburg in December.
Yes,
1985. 85.
And you
then it was
swore,
rematch in February 1987. I mean,
yes,
my
and
memory is still good enough to remember, all my losses, at least.
But you swore revenge, and you came
Yes.
back to Hamburg, and you played against an even stronger team, 8 players, grandmasters and IMs and so on. And we prepared with ChessBase 1.0, the very first version of the program. And he spent a day and a half or 2 days preparing for these 8 players, and then he went in and crushed them 7-1. And this was the result. He knew them all. He knew exactly what their weaknesses were, what their strengths were, the openings they liked or disliked, and everything. And it was for us a proof. My goodness, he loses it in one case where he was very tired and so on, and then he comes back, and with preparation, proper preparation, he can slaughter them 7-1. And that's when we launched the program. And also with his encouragement, he kept telling us, you have to commercialize this, for heaven's sake.
So I'm curious, now that, in the current modern age, now that every single player, even amateur players, have access to large chess databases, have access to extremely powerful engines, how has this changed the game of chess in the sense that, how has it changed the way that a top player obtains a competitive advantage, let's say?
Well, first of all, what I have seen in the past 2 years is that there are a number of chess players, all grandmaster strength. Some of them have the title, some not yet, and they're all around 12 or 13 years old. Now, I've worked with them. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine I tell you about a quantum physicist who's 12 years old? Now, this is a chess grandmaster. He's 12 years old. And you find out how did they do it? Well, they had 7.5 million games. They had instant access. They could learn with the help of the computer. They had a trainer, but the main work was with the computer. So it was possible. And the chess engines are very, very important as well, because you can always ask the computer, why not something? Or what if something? 2 main questions in chess. And it tells you immediately, and at a very, very high level, 3,500 ELO level.
In what way can sort of having something that tells you the answer immediately, just from a click, in what way can that be sort of a double-edged sword? If you don't mind, I'm curious, are there any sort of like unintended consequences of this technology? Is there any extent to which technology can pose a barrier to chess improvement, let's say?
Well, tens of thousands of people do not profit tremendously from it, but 1% does, and that is the percent you see playing in top tournaments.
Every technology has upsides and downsides, and as Fred pointed out, now you could have grandmasters at age 12. It was absolutely impossible 30, 40 years ago, because you had to just play in one tournament and then in a stronger tournament to gain more experience. Now you have everything, at your elbow, or it's on your screen, and they can quickly, accumulate this critical knowledge to become strong players, and also they have a lot of fresh energy of use. But at the same time, I could see downsides of this effect, because most of this information is just, it's taken from the screen. And in many instances, the young, strong players, they become kind of hostages of computers. So they are almost enslaved, because they look at the screen, and the way they think, the way they just, they project their moves, it's a reflection of a machine thinking. So the creativity, human creativity, somehow is suffering. So, and that's a problem. And very few players, I mean, Magnus Carlsen definitely is the best example, can actually resist the pressure from the screen. They can look at the screen, they can receive recommendations, but without being totally, swamped by the power of the machine. Because as Fred pointed out, computers are so much stronger today. So it's 3,500 rating. So there's no competition. And it's clearly that, machine recommendation is always superior to what humans can suggest. But still, if we are preparing for a match human versus human, so then you need certain human characteristics to be preserved.
Well, actually, I would add, like, when I was a kid and we were talking before about the classical old way of learning chess. And I think Garry also had a huge database on paper-based collection of games before the computer time, right? I had, my father made a huge job with my mother, also making 100,000 games maybe, and each game was on a card, and it was selected, sorted out by names, by players, by codes, which chess has, different openings. So that is how we were developing our knowledge, that let's say I was preparing for a tournament or learning a new opening system, then I was taking out those 200 games, and one by one I was really watching it by playing it on the board physically. So actually it was also going into my head in a completely different way. I got a much more engaging moments with the moves, with the ideas. So it was a very slow motion compared to now, when all these games which I had on paper, which Garry had on paper, and all the other top players, they were all having this, like my small luggage. I always took it on board, because of course I didn't check in, because if I would lose it, then it would be end of the world, right? So it was so different those times. And then later on, when we had the databases, I remember early 90s or late 80s, with 3,000 games, the first floppy disk. I mean, it was kind of funny. And the big difference is for chess players that when it was on paper-based material, I mean, you can have only a certain amount of books and papers on your desktop. But in the computer, we have right now already 15 million games maybe, and you can sort it by moves, by positions, by players, and all the information. You have much more information. So when you work, you don't necessarily able to sort out, to filter out only the quality stuff, because it's not extra kilos. You have all the memory in your computer. And I think this generation is growing up very differently compared to me, for example, when I was already very much into professional chess, and I had to shift from paper to technology. And also with the engines, it was so different. When it was only the first engine, for example, it was interesting. We were curious. It was giving nice ideas. It already very early pinpointed our mistakes, especially my calculations. I had great, interesting ideas if I play against a human. But unfortunately, the computer pinpointed very much my mistakes, the holes in my calculation. So it was not very much fun to play against computer for me. But it was also that by now they judge the position, they evaluate already much more correctly. I have an example when, for example, I played against one of the best English player, Michael Adams, and he played an opening of martial attack, where he's sacrificing material and for interesting play. And I was working with the computer before the game. I was with an engine, and the evaluation said that I'm winning. So I went to the game, and I exactly could make this surprising move which I planned with the computer. And then he was surprised, but he reacted in a good way. And I didn't see more than a draw, but I thought, but the computer said that I'm winning, so there must be a win. And I went out of the draw option, and I went on to play the game, and it was a huge mistake. So in those times, it was very difficult to trust the computer, but I think we are over on those times already. And now the youngsters, they know exactly what to expect from an engine, about evaluation, about different kind of move suggestion also. So there are different times on the development of computer.
Yeah, you're certainly not the last famous chess player to sort of have bad preparation against the martial attack, certainly. But I'd like to sort of shift this sort of panel just a little bit. And I was wondering if we could really start to think more broadly. And I'd like to ask all three of you, in what ways has the field of chess and the influence of technology been a case study for other disciplines as to how to work with technology?
No, I think chess was really a case study because we could find a way of sort of merging our creativity with machines' brute force. And I pioneered it in mid-90s, where machines were decent enough to actually to check our analysis, not to be too creative. So I think the first game played at the top level World Championship match again in New York in 1995. I played against Wishy Anand. So where I had great idea and I used computer, still very primitive, but to verify that the combination worked. And later on, so I used it more and more effectively by just not just checking lines, but also looking for some ideas. And by the end of the 20th century, early 21st century, it became normal practice. So nobody worked at the openings without chess computers. And then, as Judith pointed out, so there were some moments where the machine's recommendations had to be taken with caution. I think the biggest disaster was, I guess, Kramnik game against Aleko in the World Championship match. And I think it was also martial attack. Yeah, it's this. Yeah, and Kramnik and his team made an analysis. I think it happens all the time. You are in a rush, and all of a sudden, maybe an hour before the game, machine shows you the great line, and Kramnik went for that without checking it, and then machine said sorry. So it was not a win; it was actually a loss. So, but now we reached a point where we all know that machine recommendation it's like coming from Oracle. You don't have to challenge it. And the young players, they're very good in anticipating. So what is exactly just to expect from this machine in this position?
Well, I also think, for example, that the game changed quite a bit because of this trust towards the computers and engines. I mean, I see many games which is developed completely differently than, let's say, 10 years ago. Because in chess, you can choose different styles, whether you go for an opening or a middle game where you feel comfortable. You know more or less how things are, where you have to place your pieces to work out well. And in sharp, concrete lines, many people were trying to avoid because maybe they were afraid that the other one has a bigger team, they have better helpers, better computers. But by now, I think many people have higher self-confidence because they know that they have their team of a computer, and the computers usually work for many of the top players 24/7 because the engines, they make the engine work and they give suggestions. And once they are analyzing and looking at very carefully all these data and suggestion and evaluation, they decide, okay, why not? If I worked on it enough, if I have a good engine, I trust my engine, I have a great computer, great processor, I know all the database, whatever happened in the whole world in the yesterday or just an hour before, it also makes a huge difference. And people are taking much more risk in some ways. But of course, eventually your preparation stops, right? So many times it happens that you work out your preparation until the first 15 move or even first 18 move, and you have all the confidence. But after that, you're on your own to decide how you go on in complicated positions. So I also feel that many of the chess players, they are more open to go on their beliefs. And to tell you the truth, many people were telling me that computers are killing chess. And I feel the contrary, that there are, I think, much more interesting games going on than, let's say, before. Because simply because of the help of the computer, or at least the same amount of games which is engaged from the fans' point of view, I think.
Many chess fans are complaining these days that the openings are not as exciting as it used to be when Judith and I played some very sharp openings, trying to seize initiative and sacrifice material, because computers now can tell you that some of the great lines that we enjoyed so much analyzing and playing have been refuted. So I can give you a few examples of the lines that have been extensively analyzed over decades by top players. I even remember preparing one of these lines in year 2000 against Vladimir Kramnik. And now Chess Engine, within a minute or less, can tell you, sorry, forget about it, throw it in the garbage. And that's why you could see top players, they're selecting more solid openings, making sure that they can avoid a disaster. Though some of them are just still have a faith in their ability to out-prepare the opponent, but you have less and less opening duels the same way we had before. But there's also an upside, because you have chess amateurs, the same chess fans who are complaining that chess is not so exciting. Now all of a sudden they can understand what's happening at the chessboard. When I played Karpov, for instance, I remember even top grandmasters who were making commentaries of the games, they were very shy to criticize Karpov or myself, even if we made a clear mistake. Yeah, some blunders they can accept it. It was bad, but the moves that were definitely of second rate, they didn't think that they could criticize, because it's like criticizing gods. Now you can see top players competing, and machine shows that Magnus Carlsen made a mistake, and you hear internet is laughing loud because everybody knows Magnus made a mistake. And somehow I feel irritated, because how come that the army of amateurs is there to criticize the world champion? But at the same time, I understand it helps the game of chess to bring more people in, because now you don't even need a commentary of a top GM. You can simply look at your screen and understand exactly what's happening in the game between, say, Magnus and Fabiano.
I'd like to say something which Garry was saying, and it's so interesting that really opening preparation is very much so different. It was transforming so much with the computers. But also, I think, which is very important to note, I just realized by listening, Garry, that in chess, intuition was so important, right? I mean, before we really had this great intuition, you had to feel the position, you had to know all the ins and outs of the different systems in order to make the right decision, even in early opening phase or in the middle game or later stage of the game. And with the computers and the computer preparation in openings, I think simply intuition is gone, is disappeared, because in opening preparation, if a computer suggests an interesting idea or another engine suggests it, we don't say anymore that, no, this is impossible. When we were living without the engines, it was something very common, especially when I was weaker. When I was asking a more stronger player, they said, no, this is impossible. No, this is not the spirit of the position. And nowadays in opening preparation, you don't have something like this that you just ignore it. If the engine suggests it, maybe you say, well, I don't think so, but maybe.
Judit says something very, very important. Yeah, the words in the spirit of the position. That's, you don't hear it from the young players. I bet you most of them don't understand what it means. What do you mean, spirit of the position? Machine said it. Machine recommends it. And I hear it very often from young players. So they just follow the lines of the computer, and they just, they say, I did it, and it was not a good move, and machine said, I had to do something else. And my question, why? It has almost shocking effect, because they don't understand the question. What do you mean, why? Because machine said so. And the spirit of the position, the nature of the position, I would say the demand of the position. Those are the terms that are used by retired players like us. So we're talking about chess from a different age. But at the same time, it's what makes the difference between some really top players today and the rest of the field. And Magnus, as I indicated, he has an ability to resist the pressure from the computer. So he understands this language. And I think some of other top players also do understand the language. And that's, that separates them from the rest of the field. They're the players, on number 20, 30, 40, 50. They have access to the same computers, but it's not, the same way they can use it. Because somehow this intuition that Judit mentioned still matters when you are just, making decisions at the board.
I think just interesting discussion suddenly that I think also that what is a very important thing for youth players and generally for players, and probably not only in chess but in everything, that when we use computers, we tend to believe everything what it says. And if you can keep yourself being a critical thinker, then you can get the maximum out of computer, I think. Because it's great of the suggestion, but still you have to be the boss and you have to make the decision. And this is how it shifted so differently in modern chess. Because while in the beginning, it was like 20 years ago, it was me, it was my trainer. Now it's the computer which gives the suggestions. So actually a top player must be able to be a leader, a boss, and choose from which kind of idea which the computer was suggesting. I'm interested on that because I think on that direction I want more information to be able to decide. But you have to be extremely critical because, and I think this is why Magnus is so good, because he listens to the computer suggestion, he's watching, but he will going to say that I believe this is not correct and I have all the self-confidence and believe in myself doing it differently. And it goes for everything in regarding technology, I believe.